Yeah, I mean, feel free to help yourself. Amal is part of the London Buddhist Vihara. And I think some of you, we've been sending around the events that the London Buddhist Vihara runs on a pretty regular basis. They have a wonderful line of programming. They have many different speakers, such as Dr. Harris. And we have had quite close connection with Amal and the London Buddhist Vihara over the years since the beginning of this program. And Amal has been a great supporter of our own public programming. So we're really thrilled to have you, Amal, join us and to tell us a bit about the London Buddhist Vihara and the British Mahabhodi Society and the role that this plays here in the UK. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Laura. And thank you also, obviously, to Sujata, who unfortunately is unable to be with us today for very sad reasons.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like to also just say to thank you to the Courtauld Institute of Art for inviting me to give this small presentation. And I'd like to, and also just say actually that I first, I think, interacted with you and Sujata at UCAB's conference in St Andrews about 18 months ago or something. So it's all been a great interactions all round. And I know Bhante here quite well, and I met you, Bhante, it's also at the SOAS Buddhism and AI conference about 2 or 3 months ago as well. So it's good to be amongst friends. And also, before I start, I feel I'm really a bit of an imposter in this place, and I'm in the wrong panel, because I'm not an academic, and to be speaking at an Institute of Art when I don't think I even have an art GCSE or O level, okay, is quite an achievement. But there you are. I'm raised effectively in the UK. I am obviously from a Sri Lankan heritage. My family came here in the late 1960s, and I was only 6 years old when I came to the UK. So pretty much all my education has been in the UK. I was born into a Buddhist family, so I'm a born Buddhist, and I've experienced both the Batipa temple at a very early stage in the late 70s when it was just the pagoda building. And obviously I came to know the London Buddhist Vihara through visiting there on a very regular basis since my youth. The London Buddhist Vihara, there we go, right, is unique because it's the oldest Buddhist monastery outside Asia. Okay. It's currently in Chiswick, West London. That's not its original premises, and I'll run you through that later on in the presentation. The photograph on the right is our current head monk, Venerable Sila Vimala, and that photograph of him. Sorry?
You go ahead, I'm just going to move to this page. There we go.
There you go. Perfect. Okay. The Vihara, and on the left, obviously, is the building which we currently occupy, which was a public, an entertainment place actually, a social club. Sorry, that's the right word. For many years since it was first built and constructed, in a planned residential village in West London called Bedford Park. The building has quite historic, is historically graded and listed. It looks nothing like a vihara or a Buddhist temple, nothing like a pagoda or a stupa, but this is where thousands of people congregate on a very regular basis because it is home to certainly Sri Lankan Buddhists, but also Buddhists who want to learn more about Buddhism from around London, actually, because we're in a good connected part of London, in West London. We're just next to Turnham Green Tube Station on the District Line. And the Vihara is really the work of one person who brought it into being by sheer will of determination. He was determined to found the Vihara at a time of British colonialism, effectively, when Britain was ruling the world, especially Asia and Sri Lanka. And Sri Lanka and Buddhism actually was in retreat and under threat in Sri Lanka and many other countries at that time due to not just for Sri Lankans or for Asiatic people, but actually place it on a world map. And in much the same way as Emperor Ashoka spread Buddhism from India outwards into many Asian and other countries, Anagarika Dhammapada wanted to establish Buddhist centers across the world, and he traveled extensively across 3 continents, in Asia, in Europe, and North America, in efforts to do that. And he was particularly, although he had, Elizabeth has given a talk on the Vihara earlier this year, actually. You know, he has said a lot of things about the Christian faith during his talks and debates. But underlying all of that, he had a great respect for the libertarian values of British people. Okay, and he wanted to, you know, I think it was actually part of his training as a Buddhist, and the Buddhist philosophy of how do you treat people who are, when you're faced with hatred, and the answer is not to throw hatred back at them, but actually to show love. Okay, and his response to having Buddhism under threat through Christianity in Sri Lanka was to respond by saying, I'll give Britain the Dhamma, and I'll bring the Dhamma to them so they can understand what this great religion is about. And that's what he wanted to do in 1926, at a time when there was virtually no Sri Lankan diaspora here. The only Buddhists who came to him at the time were British people. Okay, so let's delve a little bit into the rationale for why this Vihara came into being by exploring about Anagarika Dhammapada, because without understanding his life, I think you won't understand why this Vihara came into being. And I'm very grateful, actually, for the 2 presentations that came earlier by Elizabeth and Jubanti, because it set the stage for this to some extent. So, Anagarika was born into a wealthy Buddhist family. His parents were merchants. They were in actually the furniture business. and that company, H. Don Corollis, is still running today, manufacturing furniture. He was born in September 17th, 1864, and in his 4th year, his right leg was disabled by a paralytic stroke. At the age of 19, he resigned from colonial government service and decided to become an ascetic, dedicating his life to humanity. Up until that time, the only schooling he could have had, and did have, was at Christian schools. There were no Buddhist schools for which he could learn. And his parents were wealthy enough to send them to, there was no state education, to private schools, missionary schools effectively. And he learnt the Bible, but he also learnt the Dhamma from home. Some of the people that really influenced him, in addition to many Sri Lankan monks, some of whom are in that picture at the top, were actually some outsiders who came to Sri Lanka because Sri Lanka had already commenced a process of, shall we say, pushback against the Christian faith by having debates. They had public debates between Christians and Buddhists. These culminated in the famous Panagara debate. I can't remember the exact year, something like 1860? 1873, there you are. And the general feeling was that the Buddhists won these debates. These were public debates in the open air. And these were written about in newspapers and in pamphlets. And they went all around the world, apparently. And news of these debates and they were read by theosophists, particularly Henry Steele Olcott and Helena Blavatsky. And they decided, well, they were very much into the integration of various religious communities, and they wanted to see what Sri Lanka was about because they knew nothing about Buddhism. And so they decided to take a ship and come to Colombo. Actually, I think they landed in Galle, which is the town 70 miles south of Colombo. And apparently the story goes that they took the 5 precepts and effectively became Buddhists. And they became part of the independence struggle that Sri Lanka was undergoing, which Anagarika's family, he was then, by the way, Don David Hevavithana, that was the name he was born, this was part of. And upon meeting, when David Hevavithana met Helena Blavatsky, they bonded very quickly, and she said that he must learn more about Buddhism, and he encouraged him to learn Pali. And she got permission from his parents to take her to Calcutta and to be secretary for the Theosophical Society there, which they were establishing. And so a very young Dhammapala left Sri Lanka to become part of the Theosophical Society. At that time, too, another great influence at that time was Sir Edwin Arnold, who had written The Light of Nature. He had been, apart from many things, a journalist, and I think rose to become editor of the Daily Telegraph here in London, but had been in India and had learnt about Buddhism himself and had studied it to such an extent that he wrote an epic poem, which was a bestseller in the UK, in all over the world, including in the UK, and that informed. More importantly, when Arnold came to Sri Lanka, he told David Hevitana, that the holy sites in India, the Bodh Gaya, where the Buddha gained enlightenment, was in a decrepit state, and it was no longer under the control of Buddhists, and it was under the control of Hindus rather, and it was in a very dilapidated state. And that information really spurred Dhammapada to find out things for himself. And in roughly 1890 or 1891, he took the step to actually, 1891, Anagarika Dhammapada visited Bodh Gaya in India. By about this time, he had renounced his name of David Hevitana and taken up the moniker Anagarika, which meant someone who is homeless or renounced worldly possessions. And Dharmapala means defender of the Dhamma. So he took a trip to Bodh Gaya to see things for himself, and he was shocked. He looked with dismay at the neglect and desecration, and he was outraged that the holiest temples for the Buddhists should be under the management of a man whose ancestors had always been hostile to Buddhism. It was at this moment, it was era should begin. And on May 31st, 1891, with the establishment of the Mahabhodi Society in India, he decided to spread the Buddha's Dhamma throughout the world. The two founders of Mahabhodi Society were and Anagarika. Much later in his life, and now I'm just fast forwarding, just to show the impact he had in India. He spent actually more time in India than in any other country, just to give you some idea. He was born in Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka regards him as a great nationalist figure. He actually fell out with a lot of people in Sri Lanka for various reasons, and decided he would be better serving Buddhism by spending most of the time and being active in India. And towards the end of his life, he constructed the Mulangaganda Kuti Vihara in Sana, in Benares, on the site where the Buddha delivered his first sermon after gaining enlightenment. This is the sermon which describes the turning of the wheel, the beginnings of the teachings of the Dhamma. And today, to show that the work of the Dhammapada, unfortunately, it went into various legal struggles in colonial Britain to wrest control of the Bodh Gaya temple and site into Buddhist hands, but he never won the battles in his lifetime, the legal struggles. But today, Bodh Gaya is now administered jointly by Buddhists and Hindus, and it is a place where hundreds of thousands of Buddhist devotees from all traditions and lineages come in their thousands every year as part of holy pilgrimages. So the work that he started did complete after his death. And I was telling you earlier that in Sri Lanka, he is revered as a great nationalist, as one of the spearheads of the independence movement. And he spoke he was a prolific writer and a speaker. but what is often neglected in Sri Lanka is that he is a universalist. His vision for Buddhism ran far outside Sri Lanka, far outside India, because he wanted to spread Buddhism around the world. And he was given that opportunity by, actually, I think Colonel Olcott invited him to represent Buddhism at the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago in 1893. This photograph is taken from that conference. Anagarika Dhammapada is in the center in white, and Swami Vivekananda, who represented Hinduism, is in the turban next to him. And there were representatives, obviously, from all the other major faiths, including Jainism and Islam, at that conference. And he is believed to have made some very resounding speeches that resonated about Buddhism at that time. And one of the side effects of that trip to America and Chicago was that, and he's still in his late 20s. He's on his way back. He had a fateful encounter with someone who would become his main benefactress throughout his life and a great supporter. And that was Mary Foster, someone who lived in Honolulu in Hawaii, who they met by chance on a ship, and she was someone who was somehow interested anyway in mystical religions from Asia, but had no actual knowledge of it. And she's believed to have spoken to Anagarika and asked how she could overcome her feelings of grief and anger. And Dhammapada is supposed to reply that she should take up meditation. And for the next 40 years, they became earnest friends, and she became, as I said, one of his great benefactors and generous benefactors. The temple in Sarnath was London. He decided late in his life that he must complete his life work by having a temple in the UK, and he finally was able to do that by a gift from Mary Foster, which he purchased a house in 1926, and that is where the first monastery, the Buddhist monastery in the West started. Monks were sent from Colombo to live in that house, and the house was renamed Foster House. Over the years, the London Buddhist Vihara changed its residence and moved to various other buildings, but always in the city of London. Sometimes in Knightsbridge, and it moved in 1964 for the first time to Chiswick in Heathfield Gardens. Again, it was just a house where they were housed. In 1994, through the sale of that house and more injection of funds from the government of Sri Lanka, who saw the merit of having a Buddhist in London, a more substantial premises was bought, and which is where we are now occupying in Bedford Park. The last three head monks are of particular merit to know about. They are, in terms of world Buddhism, they are very significant figures. Venerable Sadathissa was a very dedicated monk who I think Elizabeth also knew quite well.
Yes, well, I know I didn't need to, and he blessed me before I first went off to Sri Lanka.
Yes.
Just before his death.
Yes.
Went off in 19.
And he's also famous for advising Ambedkar, the Indian philosopher and politician who started Ambedkar Buddhist and who also wrote the first constitution of India, I think. And Venerable Sadathissa is supposed to have helped in the drafting of that constitution. Venerable Vajrayana, who took over from Venerable Sadathissa, was also a renowned Buddhist monk, Theravada monk, who actually did a lot of work in interfaith relations in Britain, and he was and through that connection, London Buddhist Vihara became a founder member of the Interfaith Network, which still exists today. Venerable Bogata Sila Vimala, or it's still functioning today, although I'm not sure it's
The network, it had to close because it lost its funding from government.
yeah. Interfaith Network is somehow going, isn't it? Yeah. Venerable Bogata Sila Vimala today still holds the mantle of the Chief Sanghanayaka of Great Britain and is given the honour of representing Buddhism at all state or national occasions. For example, at the coronation of the King, the death of the Queen, the royal marriage, the national remembrance service at the cenotaph every year. So part of the recognition of this temple, the head monk of this temple, of being given that accolade, I think is twofold. One is that because of it being the first monastery in the UK, and the second because of it is considered as a Sri Lankan temple, and Sri Lanka is the only majority Buddhist country in the Commonwealth. That I think also plays a role. The work of the Vihara has expanded over the years. Hardwired at being a conservative tradition. But the Vihara and the leadership of the Vihara has moved with the times and encouraged greater dialogue and bringing Buddhist traditions together. That photograph in the top right is actually a blessing ceremony for the coronation of the King. And we got together with Theravada monks, a Japanese monk, two Japanese monks actually from different Japanese traditions, Tibetan monks, Chinese monks, together for a blessing ceremony. And they each chanted in their own tradition at this service. And we're one of the few temples that is able to do that, to bring those traditions together. And just to show the work of the Anagarika, actually, that picture on the left is taken soon after the Vihara was started, probably in about 1927, and it shows Anagarika in that bottom left-hand corner at an interfaith gathering in London, where representatives of various other faiths are there, Islam and Hinduism. And if you look on the gentleman seated on the second from the right is Arthur Conan Doyle, who was, I think, a mystic at the time. And the lady at the centre is Annie Besant, the social activist. So, you know, Anagarika was very keen in bringing people together, people of faith especially. He found it a stimulating conversation. And this is from Interfaith Week earlier last month. And you can see Venerable Celia with the local Christian chaplain next to it in that picture. So what about the activities at the Vihara? So there is a thriving Dhamma school, a Sunday Dhamma school for children from age 5 to 16. I am a teacher at the Dhamma school. And that has been in operation since about the late 1970s actually. It started by Venerable Vajrayana. When I was at the Vihara as a child, the Dhamma school wasn't there. But it's a thriving school, and parents send their children and come from counties as far away as Yorkshire just to send their children on a Sunday to come to this Dhamma school. Okay, so this is just some photographs from the past, just to show how the Vihara has progressed. So this picture was taken in Heathfield Gardens, and as you can see, it's inside that house which we saw earlier, and I can see how it's very cramped, and you've got 4 monks there, including the head monk at that time, Venerable Sadatissa, and instead of a large shrine room, you can just see a Buddha statue there behind it. On his right, to our left, is Venerable Vajrayana, who became the next head monk. And the lady in white on the right is a lady called Mrs. Irene Quittner, and she's a British lady who was a devoted Buddhist, and she's the one from whom I learned my Buddhism, because she was such a superb teacher. And this is another story. So there are now something like 160 up until about 1964, the London Buddhist Vihara was the only Buddhist temple in the UK. And so when I came to England, that was the only choice to go to. But over time, obviously the numbers of Buddhists, the expression of wanting a Buddhist learning has increased, and various traditions have sprouted up. This is Ajahn Ahimsako, who actually began life in San Francisco. And his journey into Buddhism is quite interesting. He's actually by profession a classical dancer. He came to the UK because he had a Sri Lankan girlfriend. And upon coming here, he asked his girlfriend to learn, how can I learn more about your culture? And so she took him to London Buddhist Vihara. And the strange thing is that he took up Buddhism and ditched the girlfriend, and now he's a monk.
What about his girlfriend now?
I don't know. Okay, so what's happening now? So I think Laurie told you about the various activities that are happening at the Vihara. There are regular, it's a place of learning, principally, okay? So there are times and places that you can come and learn to meditate. You can take classes in Introduction to Buddhism. You can take advanced classes in Buddhism, where you can learn about sutras and higher, more difficult things, more advanced things. And also there are regular debates and discussions. And that is where the British Mahabhodi Society is now focusing on, which is, I am the secretary for the British Mahabhodi Society, and I try to have an English talk with a good speaker who's either monastic or an academic or someone with a particular skill in explaining elements of the Dhamma or Buddhism. Generally our events are in person, but are also live streamed via Zoom. We try to record them so that they're later available to be rewatched. And in addition to the talk, there are lots of discussions and Q&As after that. And we've had a good range of speakers. I don't know if you know some of those people there. So people like Kate Crosby, Elizabeth, Ajahn Dhammanando, Graham Dixon, Alice Collette, indeed, yes. Okay. So some of the speakers that don't come, we zoom them in online. We also had a talk about the Amal aabeywaedena stupa at the British Museum. Richard Blurton is an ex-curator at the British Museum. And we've also established some good collaborations. In addition to the Courtauld Institute, we're doing some outreach with SOAS, and we did a collaboration on Buddhism and AI there. So those are some of the interesting things that we're doing new. And so the Vihara is a place where you can discover new insights, meet old and new friends, come and learn to meditate, to show devotion, to collaborate, to learn, and to find peaceful sanctuary in a busy city. Everyone is welcome. Thank you.
Thank you,
Any questions?
But I just wonder, when Anna carried out Dhammapala and renounced the world and meditated as a homeless person, he was in fact not homeless, but where does he live? Where did he live? He still lived at his own place, or he has his own
He lived at the
monastery?
Sometimes at a monastery, but he had no fixed abode actually. Sometimes he would live with his parents. He was a restless person. He was always on the move. Even, I think when he was in Sri Lanka, he was always touring around, village to village.
Yeah.
Encouraging people
So
to...
where does his main financial support come from?
He's come from his parents.
For family?
His parents were wealthy.
Yeah.
In many respects, he led a life somewhat like the Buddha, who came also from a very wealthy background and renounced things. In the book by one of the best books on Anagarika is this one, Rescued from the Nation by Stephen Kemper, an American academic at Bates University, who gives a very much more of an all-round picture of him, and he describes him primarily as a renouncer, someone who renounced things, and someone who was a universalist. And that's what I would recommend that if you want to learn more about it. There are other biographies.
So you want me to pass it on? And then
Please. I can put together a sort of a reading list. I think some of this is this is Sangharakshita's biography of Anagarika Dhammapala, which is free to download from the internet. And these are some commentaries about Anagarika Dhammapada and his work and the life of the Vihara. All of these are available free from if you visit the Vihara, and you're more than welcome to do. And as I think Elizabeth alluded to, this Sunday is Sanghamitra Day, and it's a festival day. It's to do with a Poya full moon day. That's unique. Started in Sri Lanka. It's a festival day every month for Vesak, Esala, Possum, and so on.
Does anyone have any questions or thoughts about this presentation?
Yeah. Starts in the morning from about 10. Yeah, lots of good Sri Lankan food.
That's reason to go.
Are you from Sri Lanka? Yeah. Oh, okay. So one of the old girls, the Colombo, cooking with us. And actually this year I think there's a group time last year.
We did, yes. I've attended some online as well.
Oh, have you?
Yeah.
Okay. There's a
Which is
Laurie-
convenient.
There's a Laurie Wong also in New York. I presume that's not you.
Around the world. All imposters, but you know. Yeah, I mean that was really fascinating. I didn't know about the history of the founding of London Buddhist Vihara, so it's quite eye-opening. Yeah.
Thank you.
When I lived in London in Kingsbury,
All right.
there was the
Southern Vista
the
left.
Sri
Yeah.
Sri Lankan that split off from. That was quite painful.
Yeah. Things happen. And, it was the followers of one monk weren't happy that the head monk was injured.
Yes.
It has a very good library. If you're interested in Buddhist finding and reading about Buddhism, there's a very good library.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just on Theravada, but it's specialized in Theravada, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
But it does look at lots of other traditions.
Yeah.
And if you're thinking of going to Sri Lanka for Buddhist reasons, it's a good place to hop in there and explore the opportunities that it offers. We will be offering at some point.
Like organized
Yeah, we're not sure
tours?
how to do that at the moment. We'll have to work with some partners with that offering, but that's what we're trying to work on doing.
I have a question. Kind of can be differentiated as its own school, or was he
that's a good question. So he was a born Theravada Buddhist, okay, and that was practice. He actually became a monk in the last 2 years of his life. Okay, and that was also the Theravada tradition. So he had great respect for all the Buddhist traditions. I think he believed that they all came from the same source, so that there shouldn't be any reason for any difficulties or conflicts. He didn't have his own particular strand of Buddhism. It was just part of the Sri Lankan mainstream Theravada.
Ambedkar. So Ambedkar learned Buddhism and then created his own teaching, but it is based on Buddhism. From my observation, many followers of Ambedkar just take Ambedkar teaching rather than Buddha teaching. It is one of the problems. But I don't think Dhammapala has produced any teaching. He just focused on promoting Buddhism, devote himself for Buddhism, sacrifice his life for Buddhism. Yeah, I have never heard that.
But it wasn't about any old original scriptures, as it were.
He did draw out, I think, from Buddhism when he was speaking in the West. He drew out what he thought was relevant to the West. I mean, a selection of his speeches and writings are gathered together by a person who supervised my PhD and under Guruge.
Okay.
And he
Return to righteousness.
Yes, return to righteousness, and you can see how he's drawing out from the tradition what he feels the West would be interested in, not creating something completely new, but contributing in some ways to Buddhist modernism, what we might now call Buddhist modernism, but not inventing his own teaching. But it's what everyone does when they talk about Buddhism to particular groups. I think.
Well, thank you again, Amal, and thank you to all 4 speakers. In many ways, kind of fit nicely together and complemented each other. So another round of applause to the speakers. Thank you all. So we are a bit late in terms of we're supposed to be at the British Library at 2:30. So we probably should be getting ourselves ready to make the 15 to 20 minute walk to the British Library so that we can meet the curators there at 2:30. I'm wondering if we can tell the people upstairs that we can come back, and somebody can just let them know that maybe a couple of us can come back because I think they should still be open till 5. So I just want to make sure they know that we are going to return stuff to them.